Hello, friends and family. This is Michael Dove of the Deep Soul Work broadcast. And um, today we have a very special guest. He is Mr. Alexander Fals. And I was very intrigued by his thoughts and the things that he has to present. And I wanted to share it with a larger audience. And present him to you. And then we should have a very interesting and deep discussion. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So let me bring him up now. Alexander, welcome.
Hello, Michael. Thank you.
Hi. Yes. And I was very intrigued with your bio and some of the things that you said that you had to present. And I like the ideas, and I like language, and I like words and such. And I feel like it would be very interesting to share and explore a little bit with you. And so, what I'd like to do is just kind of um, present you the floor to kind of lay out some of your thoughts, especially thoughts around empire brain and such. Okay, and so let's
Certainly.
do that now.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on your podcast. I find it fascinating that you're in India and I'm in New York and we can do this. And I want to give thanks to the universe for um, for being. And can you still hear me and see me okay, Michael?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
can.
All right. So I want to start from the beginning to help people understand my motive, where I'm coming from. I had a turbulent childhood. My father's a Colombian immigrant, and my mother's from New York. They were both chefs, and there was, a lot of love in their experience, but unfortunately, their marriage did not last. And so I was kind of caught up in between divorce and alcoholism and poverty and other things. And I had the opportunity to go to a Quaker summer camp, and it was a farm camp. And I did that for many years, and it was probably the most impactful, the most beneficial time in my development. And because of that, I wanted to study environmental conservation. So I went to school here in upstate New York at Finger Lakes Community College. And I really enjoyed my classes. I enjoyed studying nature and talking about the earth and the future of nature. But I had the unique opportunity to also go to Colombia, where my father was from, and meet the people who are cutting down the rainforest. So, in the environmentalist movement, there's a lot of, save the rainforest, which of course is super important. But when I met the people who were there and being forced to do it because of the conditions they were in, the conditions their children were in, it was apparent to me that the the environmentalist issue is a humanitarian issue. And I was a little disillusioned by that, and I had other callings in my life to be an artist. So somehow my path took me to Colombia, and I would paint with mineral pigments, which is a technique that my uncles have done since the 70s. So we go out and collect different colors in the ground and mix them up and make paint and paint on canvas. And while I was painting, I would listen to audiobooks a lot. And so this burning question in my mind that was the original question about, okay, I want to help the environment, but wait, it's a humanitarian issue. And I had kind of given up. I thought, well, I guess there's no use. There's nothing I can do. I didn't do well in school, and so but my curiosity was left just to explore, and I listened to many books, many books, constantly trying to answer this question. And I had the opportunity to also work as a life coach And in that experience as well, I felt like there was a burning question, something I was seeking, an inability to kind of put my finger on. And that is how the idea of Empire Brain was born. It's a combination of psychology and trauma, generational trauma, which of course is something people have known about for a long time, but the recent clinical studies on generational trauma and how trauma manifests and addiction's connection to trauma and intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and all these things are pretty cutting edge still. So it it takes the understanding of that, the greater understanding of that, and saying that there's actually one thing that kind of provokes all of this. There's one thing that provokes all this generational trauma, and it's an extrinsic motivation form that you can see starting with monotheism and with empire. And there's lots of books to talk about this. So, of course, this is just my um, perspective, and but it's documented. I think the thing that I like about my project is that I'm just connecting the dots. I don't have any clinical studies, but what my work does is tries to make a connection. So the third piece is language, as you alluded to. That there's a book called Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung, and there's another book called How Emotions Are Made by a woman named Lisa Feldman Barrett. And there's a lot of discussion about, and from a wellness or from a spiritual perspective, of course, people talk about this a lot, the power of word, the energetic power of word, but also from a scientific or from an anthropologic point of philosophic, words are what we use to agree upon our reality, right? Everybody's reality is different. But when we share a language, we share an understanding of a world that we can then discuss and communicate about because of that language. And so the way that language is organized, the words that are available and aren't available, the way that the society is kind of posed or oriented is greatly, you could say, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, affected by the language, or the language affects the society, or both. So, I realized that we have a lot of different words that talk about where violence comes from. We can say, toxic masculinity. We could say racism. Or we could say patriarchy, or we could say narcissism, or we could say egotist. And so all of these words kind of point the energy back at someone else. They point the energy, oh, this woman's a bitch, or oh, this or that, right? But there isn't a word that actually labels the through line behind all those mindsets, all those violent mindsets. They all come from a disconnect with your intrinsic self and a motivation by the extrinsic. And that can come from, or like I said, I think that you can see that beginning mostly at a certain time in history. And of course, history is this ever-changing thing that people try to make heads or tails of as we have whatever information is available to us. And the interpretations of that information and the origin of that information is all hearsay at this point, because these people are long since dead. So, we are told often that agriculture, kind of everybody was nomads, and then there was agriculture, and then there were cities, and then there was a king, and that was kind of a natural progression. But what people are unearthing now is a book called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber, is that people were nomadic and agricultural for many, many generations, and they would organize on a mass scale before empire. And it wasn't until the implication of grain agriculture that empire became possible, because you can feed an army on grain, you
Mhm.
can use it as currency, and you can show up during harvest time and take your taxes, and you can take all the grain at once. And we know that
Yeah.
grains aren't the most nutrient rich food for people, so it does kind of make sense that, oh yeah, why did everyone decide to just eat bread all the time, even though it has less nutrients than fruit and
Mhm.
green veggies and other things like that.
Uh-huh.
So, or of course root vegetables, which is the food of the free people, as they allude to in this book, also by James C. Scott. That book is called Against the Grain, where he
Uh-huh.
particularly talks about that. So let me try to finish up here,
Okay.
or at least get to a place where you can ask a good question. An essential concept of design for Empire Brain is that, as you know, to find a connection with intrinsic self takes a lot of work. And it's a very painful, beautiful, but painful process, especially if you've been detached from it and your actions have potentially, furthered you from that, or you've hurt yourself and hurt other people in that detachment, which is often what happens. The, there's a lot of self-help books out there. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to actually use the power of human engagement, stigma, you might call
Mhm.
it. There's a woman who wrote a book called um, the scout mindset, and she talks about how we, in ourselves, you can think about the general and the scout. The scout has to look for truth, and the general has to make a decision and doesn't have time, right? And so she kind of
Yeah.
critiques the general, but also says there are times that's necessary. Mostly let's try to engage scout when we can and be able to switch back and forth. But the
Mhm.
epiphany I had was that the scout has to point out the enemy to the soldier. They aren't separate, they're one functioning thing. And
Yes.
so, as scouts, we must point out the enemy to the soldier in us and to the soldier and other people, because right now the soldier's going crazy, fighting every which way. We have all these enemies, perceived enemies, but when we fight them with fire, they respond like the Hydra with seven more heads, right? And so there's
Yeah.
no way to understand where the heart of that enemy is. And the scout has to point that. And when that's pointed out, no one's going to want to be near it, because we have a phenomenon in human um, society, an antithesis. We know what we don't want to be more than we know what we want to be, especially from a
Mhm.
place of fear. And so,
Yeah.
knowing that our society is in a place of fear, let's use that. Let's be like judo. Let's use the power that's already present. It contains kind of a bit of the venom that created it, to help. I think that it's, when I say a bit of the venom, I mean that it feeds on the thing that it perpetuates.
Mhm.
And so this is why it's a concept of design. It's not necessarily a scientific discovery. It's more, I think of it as an artistic creation
Ah,
that
okay.
is not necessarily in the confines of conventional art, but a more deeper understanding of what emotional creation, that the process of art through
Yes. Yes.
mindfulness, and. So
Yeah.
and so, anyways, I'll stop there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. This is very interesting because, um, from what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing correctly, we're talking about the power of words, the power of language, and how language has functioned to create community, to facilitate bonds, communication and such. Um, and this is critically important.
Mhm.
From my observation and what I'm hearing from you, because when I think of that, um, think of the power of words, and then the deep, even mystical or almost occult power of words. It's like
Mhm.
we words are constructed through these bits of letters, which we call uh, spelling. Spelling. When we look at the term spelling, it's essentially harnessing the intrinsic and talismanic qualities of words. So, in a sense, when you spell something, you're casting a spell. The language constructs reality.
Hmm.
We live in the vessel. We live in the vessel that is constructed with these spells, these spells that we cast mostly unconsciously, but sometimes consciously. And if we're conscious of it, then we can be very, very smart and strategic and wise, and then address our predicaments by consciously constructing the linguistic vessel for which we experience and manifest reality.
Hmm.
That's what comes to my mind,
Yeah,
and there's a
yeah.
lot.
There's a lot there. Absolutely. I I think that there's almost a distinction that I want to make,
Mhm.
given this idea in the magic of words and spells, because I'm seeing it now. There's almost like a catching of a spell and then casting of a spell, because
Yeah.
when words are made of consciousness, right? You think of something when you hear that word, and so there's a piece of consciousness that's connected to that word, right? And so
Yeah.
it isn't just a free floating thing.
Certainly.
Right? And
Hmm.
so that consciousness has power, of course,
Hmm.
right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
And in art, there's a distinction between art and craft that has not been necessarily defined in the mainstream discussion for, I think, many generations.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I I love craft. This is not a binary thing. It's just an urge to understand deeper, and I think you have to have your craft to make your art. But
Mhm.
art involves a question. There is a seeking. The expression of anger, I can say, oh, this is how you express anger. Rah! But when I
Mhm.
express an emotion through art, there's a part of it that I don't understand. And
Certainly.
as I make it, it becomes clearer to me.
Hmm.
And so in the expression, it's kind of a two-part thing. I'm not expressing something I already understand. That would be craft.
Hmm.
Um, there has to be, like I said, a question. And so therefore you can't really judge it from that place of, oh, is this good art? Is this bad art? Is this saleable? Are people going to think I'm crazy? You can, but at that point you've entered into craft, and you're judging it
Yeah.
and you're wanting it to be something you already know. Um,
Hmm.
true. And so I think words are like that too, where you have to create it and then you have to catch it like a firefly that's floating by.
Yes. Yeah.
The world is around you. It's a conscious thing. We are conscious. We're in that vessel, and we can say, right there, that's a this. And then we can,
Hmm.
but right at that moment, in that grasping, in that naming, there's a finding.
Yes.
But after it's found and we pass it on, there's it changes, because that's where stereotypes or oversimplifications come from, right? Where you say, oh, I know what that is, so I don't have to investigate. There's no question anymore
Yeah.
of what is that. So there's no need to name it again because it's already been named.
Hmm.
Um, and so in that, I think we're talking about kind of potentially the distinction between the magical uh, yeah, the casting of the spell and the creating of the spell.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is it's a conjuring process.
Conjuring. Thank you. Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating because as you speak, it's like what comes to my mind is like I like to look at like history, in terms of how this has been engaged and dealt with, and I'm looking at like what comes to my mind is history, recent history, like within my own lifetime. a concrete example or an example of engaging with words, how things happen was is like within, say, the Black community in America. I remember a time when we decided to change the word. We changed. I
Mm.
remember we changed it from colored to Negro to Black. You see, with
Yeah.
each word, there was a whole consciousness attached to it, and each word opened up a bit more of the dimensionality of the full human. It's like with each word, you invoked another being. You know, you spoke someone else into being, and thus it influenced and shifted the reality that we were collectively living through. So for me, that's like a very vivid, concrete, historical. It's like we could see how that works,
Right.
and because of that, it's like, okay, how else can we engage language in such a wise, deliberate, conscious way? You see, to address our reality, our circumstance,
Yeah.
and
Well, so, what you just said, I think brings up some interesting questions for me, and I'd love to hear your perspective. Given the example you just brought up, they say it's easier to lie in a second language
mm,
because you're less emotionally attached to the words. And it's easier to, like, when I say easier to lie, I mean it's harder to detect lies on a lie
mm,
detector test, or for someone, you see what I mean?
yeah,
There's a visceral distinction. And so in the beauty that there can be a new beginning, from changing a word. I when I learned to speak Spanish, I felt a huge relief because I was only ever reminded of a time in my life that started when I began to speak. All those new words had new connotations, new memories, new
mhm,
people attached to them. And I was living in a way where I could kind of leave behind my old self, you know?
yes, yeah,
Um, I'm sure you've experienced that.
mhm,
And so there's beauty in that, but there's also potentially a danger in that where you can kind of sweep under the rug, right? You could use that as a deflection.
uh-huh,
Um, and so, of course, in the discussion of civil rights and of humanitarian rights and of racial rights and all these things, the question still very, very much exists. Um, where are we going with all that? Where is our trajectory? And it almost feels like racially things have gotten worse, um,
mhm,
at least in the way that it's kind of put out and propagandized, with the internet and the algorithms. But I think people
mhm,
are very much affected by that, a similar kind of what we're saying. That's the magic of it may not be worse in people's hearts. People might still,
yeah,
they might be closer to loving their neighbor than they were before. But the fact that they're being hit all the time with all this fear of you should be ashamed of yourself, or your race is a sacred thing, is a it's your identity, and
mhm,
all these things are terrifying for people, because they don't know who they are. We don't know who we are, and we're just trying to connect vulnerably, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think that the key element, and which is I think what you're trying to do, is bring like consciousness to the import of the reality of language.
Yep.
It's like, yes, we can use language, we can employ it, we can engage it and shift it and such. Um, but the real element is, the important element is that we are consciously doing it. It's like we are being very intentional about it, and that we know that that's the power of
Right.
it, and that
And
and that yeah. I was
If I
just
can,
going to say that,
please finish. Please finish.
yeah, that perhaps a way out of or into a much more encompassing, transcendent kind of mode collectively would be to, for this understanding of language to be more universal.
Yeah,
You see.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That is that is a huge part of this, and I think this is a perfect time to introduce or kind of accentuate the importance of emotion. When we talk about
Mhm,
knowledge or reality and words, we think about, okay, what are all the things we know?
mhm,
But we don't necessarily think, what are all the things we feel? And this, the reason why Lisa Feldman Barrett's work is so important is because she's saying if you don't have a word for an emotion, you won't feel that emotion,
mhm.
right? If
Yeah.
you don't have an emotional intelligence on a vocabulary, because people talk about emotional intelligence, but it's really just emotional vocabulary. The
Certainly.
words, right? And maybe a part of that emotional intelligence would be that creative, that conjuring. That's an important part too. But
Yes. Yes.
having the words is kind of crucial, to be able to
Mhm.
navigate and share that reality with someone. So she she talks about it. I'm not going to say it's, she's very insistent and she's done amazing work. But a lot of the examples that she uses in her books are probably oversimplified to cast a wide net so lots of people can appreciate them. But she talks, in
Mhm.
Japan, there's a word for having a not liking your new haircut. Or in, I believe, Korean, there's a word for wanting to squeeze a baby's cheeks because they're so,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Or and so people experience these things on a daily basis because it's a word that their mother and their grandmother and their grandfather used, and they would enact it, and it was a part of their culture, and it was a part of their experience, and it was in their songs, and you see what I mean?
Mhm.
um, and and so that's interesting from just like, oh, what a novel way, maybe I'd like to feel this or feel that, or learn a new language,
Yeah.
that's exciting. But it also from a sense of like, holy shit,
Yeah.
we are being pulled apart by our emotions. It is our emotions and our lack of an ability to communicate that has kept us down, that has kept us apart, right? Paulo Freire's The Dialogical Revolution,
Mhm.
Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh, from so many angles for so long, from so many indigenous cultures. We have been talking about this thing, and right now in our society, it's so sad because, in the name of justice, in the name of liberalism, in the name of, um, you know, care and empathy, we still can't see our way around justifying violence. And so I believe that is not wise, because wisdom is the perpetuation of positive karmic cycles. And
Yes. Yeah.
the triangle of abuse is victim, assailant, savior, right? So when we
Yeah.
exist in this external judgment, this extrinsic motivation, we align as the hero, we see a victim, we see an assailant, and it's in our literature, the epic tale, our society is kind
Mhm.
of based on that. But we also have the wizard, Tolkien's Gandalf. That book is chock full of wise quotes. And I say wise not as an elusive mystical thing, but you can tell that they specifically refer to, no, don't kill because you don't know the future. Something good may come from this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something does. Those are applied wisdoms where you say,
Mhm.
I am not just me. We are not separated. If I kill you now, it doesn't end here. Something somewhere is gonna come back from this.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
give that is good is good. What I give that is bad is bad. That's not, just a spiritual dogma. It has
Certainly.
logical application. It
Mhm.
has logical application in every way, in every part of living. And so, yeah, to me, it feels kind of, it was shocking how important it feels. And once I saw it, it felt like, um, I felt like I couldn't unsee it. I was very emotional. I was crying and talking to
Mhm.
people, and not trying to seek external validation, but feeling like this is so important. There's so much
Mhm,
suffering. There's so much pain.
mhm.
I've always wanted to answer this question, and now accidentally, I feel like I have.
Ah,
So I'm
yes.
writing this book,
Mhm.
and actually, the most beautiful element of it is that the first part of the book is the gift of art,
Uh-huh.
because Empire Brain is the antithesis of art, because art is not just a commodity. Art is the language that mindfulness uses to embrace suffering.
Yeah.
It is that essential part of that conjuring, and that's what makes art, and that's why it has such
Yes.
power, and that's why it's been kept down, and that's why pop culture glorifies certain elements of emotions. Um, you know, so I start the book right now. There's 7 chapters, and I talk about art and craft. I talk
Hmm.
about beauty being in the eye of the beholder. That it's easy to see beauty in youth, but it's harder to see beauty in age and in death. And as you enlighten the love for yourself, as you enter into that extrinsic place, and you can accept the parts of yourself that you've exiled, or that you've shamed, or that you've felt pain for, and you can invite them in, then it allows you to give that same compassion to the world around you. And all of a sudden, what you
Sure.
saw once as violent and evil becomes beautiful, becomes sad, becomes akin to you, becomes close,
Yeah.
becomes intimate. And that goes deeper and deeper. And a masterpiece is something that has value to humanity. You don't have to be a master to make a masterpiece, because it casts a wide empathic engagement. And so it's essential that an artist be not only seeking intrinsically, because we all have that same experience. We're in this illusion that, oh, I'm alone, no one would ever understand me. But the reality
Mhm.
is, we're all going through the same thing. We're all consciousness.
Oh, yeah,
we're
yeah,
all
yeah,
we're all God experiencing ourselves. And so that's why this phenomenon of the masterpiece is so beautiful, because artists
yeah.
intrinsically create, and it has this mass power around it. So I in the book try to just chock it full of
Hmm.
the best pieces of what I know and what I love and what I can contribute to the books that I've loved: Rick Rubin, Stephen Pressfield, Julia
Uh-huh.
Cameron, and Robin George Collinwood, The Principles of Art.
Hmm.
So that's the first part, and then I allude to the Empire Brain in it, because I needed that word, and so I
Yes.
use it. And then the second part is the concept of design. To the artists who understand what it is to create, this is my creation, and I act that I set it free. I allow it to be a seed in the hearts of anyone who will
Yeah.
bear its fruit,
Yeah.
and you know that is kind of how the project has come to fruition.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, what you're saying, I think, is very, very important, and I think that there's a lot there. It's like one of the key things that I'm hearing from you is the concept or the principle that we are all artists, or we all have this capacity to be the artist. And what I'm in my way of thinking in terms of like what I'm hearing from you is that an element or an essence of art is communication, meaning that it has to reach a person. Um, a communication has to happen, and so when I think of that relative to the issue of like violence, human violence, the violent impulse, and what that's about, where that comes from. And I think of a statement that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King made back in the day about riots. He said that riots are the expression of the unheard. Okay, meaning that their communication has broken down at some really, really critical place. Communication is broken down, but the expression, the need for the expression still it exists. And so what it implies, as I think about it, is that art. language, the very, very conscious talismanic application, the exquisite application of words and language, um, so that one can be adequately witnessed, fully witnessed, can diffuse the impulse to be violent. If you, when somebody is seen, when someone is, as I like to say, truly seen, they calm down. It's like
Hmm.
when their heart is seen, when their heart is met, when someone is truly, really seen, like on a
Hmm.
perhaps even on a soul level, it
Sure.
diffuses the triggers.
Hmm.
It diffuses the triggeredness, and so it's like, I mean, I've seen that with when I'm talking to people, and I talk to lots of people, and one of the things I like to do is like use very precise language to describe like moods and emotions and such. So when I suggest that, okay, you're feeling some distress around this, and the nature of the distress is maybe a sense of dread, an impending sense of
Hmm.
dread, and
Hmm.
if that's right, they go, yes. Yes,
Hmm.
suddenly there's
Hmm.
something shifts. Something shifts
Right.
when the right words are applied. When a true when someone has been truly witnessed. And see, so it's like I like um, how you explore the potential of language, the use of language in terms of human interaction and applying it to, say, the world
Yeah.
that we're in now.
So let's dive right into this, and I'll kind of be extreme in my language to try to we'll do a co-creation, a dialogue. Obviously, that's where we are, but we'll kind of turn up the heat on this puppy a little bit.
Hmm.
So I have come to see art differently. I don't think of it like recently. This is very recent, but we think about art as this. It's something you could use or not use. It's something you could engage with or not engage with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and Martin Luther King talking about riots, right? The unseen. Humans' the thing that separates humans from every other animal is our ability to collaborate. But we collaborate on what we align with emotionally, right? Martin Luther King didn't say, I have a plan. He didn't say, I have an idea. He said, I have a
Hmm.
dream,
Yeah.
you know? And that evokes an alignment in something deeper, right? And art, it exists in that same plane, right? And that's the power, the danger of it, because when you seek intrinsic, you can make craft and say, oh, I'm gonna make the best thing and everyone's gonna love it. It's gonna have
Yeah.
a fancy car and a pretty girl and a bottle of beer and or whatever people like.
Hmm.
And you see that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when someone seeks inside of themselves and conjures something absolutely profound and glorious that aligns with everyone around them to say, yes, that's that thing. I already knew it inside me, but I never got to see it out like this. I haven't seen it like that. And I love it. I love it already much. I love it already because I love it so much because it's a part of me. That's
Hmm.
me. Right.
Yeah.
And we align like that. We have this
Yes.
power. And so what I understand now is that, like in the never ending story, they say um, nothing is eating Fantastica, and you have to give the childlike princess her name to save Fantastica, but nothing turns to hatred and betrayal and deceit in the human realm. And so,
Hmm.
we talk about art and human suffering. Human suffering. So you have to engage with your emotions. You either engage with them voluntarily or involuntarily, or on a
Certainly.
scale of the
Certainly.
two, right?
Yes.
And as Thich Nhat Hanh says, art is the language that mindfulness uses to embrace suffering. And so, in that
Yeah.
experience, the process of taking involuntary emotional action into
Hmm.
voluntary is mindfulness.
Yes. Yeah.
That is also art. Art,
Hmm.
those two words, we can distinguish them, right? Oh no, art's on the shelf, right? I pay for
Yeah.
art and I dance, but mindfulness, no, that's somewhere else. No,
Hmm.
at their essence,
Exactly.
at
Yes.
their
Yes.
essence, they are the same action, right?
Yeah.
But we don't think of art as art because there's craft everywhere, right? And you
Mm.
can see amazing artists, really great artists who don't get the time of day because they don't have $1 million to get them on whatever mainstream
Mhm.
TV. So,
So,
there's all this illusion and misunderstanding about what is art, what is mindfulness, what is reality, what is language. People say, oh, everything's already been done, right? Everything's already been. We are so goddamn stuck,
yes, yeah,
and it's amazing. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a
yeah, 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 yeah,
opportunity.
yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. It's like I'm very lucky. I live in India, and lived here for a few years, and it's like art and consciousness are so intertwined as to be so indistinguishable. Life and living is art. You essentially become the art. Your being becomes the art. The way that you move and the daily rituals and everything. It's like there's that sense of integration of it.
Yes.
It's yeah, yeah. It's I think that um, your ideas about, like, to use a phrase like taking art off the shelf,
Yeah.
make making it democratizing it. It is something that is uh, out of our everyday humanness. uh, is I think is very important because, um, for one thing, it gives life meaning. It's like
Yes.
meaning. People become agitated. They become fundamentally distressed if there's no meaning
Mm.
to life.
Yeah. Right.
That's why these are important ideas, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that is exactly where this is that, the thing that I love about it is that I'm not trying to come to it from a place of us of art is a sacred thing, and so how dare you put it on the shelf, right? Take it off because you should have more respect for yourself in art, right? That's never going to work.
Mhm.
But what about the turtle that turtle is standing on? What about saying, we did the same thing with food, right? We thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have strawberries all year round? Yeah, it would. And then we made these giant monoculture things. We lost all this culture. We don't have seasonal fruit, and we don't have the
Mhm.
wisdom that actually gets more nutrients out of the land, that gets more out of the seasons, because it's
Mhm.
not trying to defy nature in its rigidness. And art, it
Exactly.
happens
Exactly.
that way too, right? Where you're like, okay, I wrote this song, now I'm going to go play it, and it's got to come out like fresh strawberries every time. And it doesn't, and it loses its. And
Mhm.
people say, oh, what the fuck happened? That was delicious two
Yeah.
weeks ago, but it's not
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
anymore. And and
Mhm.
and when artists see, like, if you want to really make it good, understand this, right? Understand that you, in that action, in your misconception, um,
Mhm.
are actually taking the value out of your art. And everybody wants to make their art valuable, so just give them the truth. Like,
Mhm.
make it rational, make it understanding, bring it to light. Don't shame or blame or virtue signal about what good art is, because art is not. I need the art of everyone else. Like, my art is my art. Everyone else's art is everyone else's art, and it's just a physical or sonic representation of our emotional connection, which is the thing I've been starving for my whole life. The thing that
Mhm.
kills my brothers and my fathers and my mothers and my sisters. And I'm so hungry and just excited, and I've already seen the power of it. You know, the miracle has revealed itself to me kind of a few spirals over again.
Certainly.
And so I feel really excited to be talking to you about it today.
Yeah. I was just thinking that I'd imagine uh, in Colombia.
Hmm.
I've been to Colombia too,
Cool.
and the indigenous culture, the shamanic culture, in which art and craft are kind of all together, and it's everybody relates to it or is engaged with it because it's such a it's such an integrated part of life.
Yeah,
It's
well, you know,
yeah,
if I can just respond to that,
sure.
a part of this was also very much learned and validated by
Mhm,
sitting in. Uh, I had the opportunity. I met my cousin was drinking in Colombia. They call it yahe, which is
uh-huh,
ayahuasca.
uh-huh,
Um, and he met this indigenous guy. He's like, "Oh, you got to meet him." And I went
mhm,
and met him. It was what his Spanish was a second language. He spoke in a dialect, and we instantly just became brothers. Like, we could
yeah.
just tell that he had this fire. He was so laughy and he was so fiery and fun, and I
Hmm.
had a lot of stuff to deal with, but I also was very intrigued with psychedelics from a young age.
Hmm.
And I understood kind of the distinction between the recreational drugs that made you feel really bad and hurt people, and the other ones that almost beckoned you into
Yeah.
something better, made you want to call your mom and tell you love her.
Mhm.
Um, so he told me, we did an interview with him after many times sitting in circle and going through many things.
Hmm.
He said that, we were going to ask him questions, and the gentleman with me said, "No, just let him talk. He knows what to say." And the first thing he said was, "Seek to understand your roots and your ancestry, right? Not just people, but your colors, your vibrations, your plants, your animals, your universal ancestry.
Hmm.
And when you do, right, when you can truly love yourself and take that path, find your path and take it, then you will be able to see the root and the path of others. You'll be able to see the beauty of
Yes,
others, and these are
exactly.
parables that are arguably, at least 20,000 years old, if not
Hmm. Certainly.
longer. So, and you can see them all over. You can see them all
Yeah.
over, so it's not a unique thing, but it helps kind of crystallize the idea, or in that reality or in that understanding, when we're all trying to seek the same, we're all trying to understand, and we all have a
Hmm.
similar human experience, and when you start seeing patterns, you
Certainly.
know yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very glad to be able to talk with you, and I think that we should probably do it again sometime in the future. Um,
Right.
yeah, and so below, I will, with your permission, uh, give information where people can get in contact with you and see your see your work, um, your art, and when your book comes out,
Yeah.
I hope that you will get in contact with us and
Great.
let's showcase your book and your words and thoughts once again.
Absolutely, Michael. Yeah, I'm just, excited that this all came together and how it did. And you
Mhm.
you never know, but when the universe says, "Sure, come in," then you
Yeah, yeah,
do,
yeah.
and here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I
Exactly.
look forward to that. My Instagram is Alexander Falls, Fals, one L.
Uh-huh.
And that's an Instagram, and I think my subtitle is Painter, Alexander Falls Painter or something. But it's Alexander Falls on Instagram. We
Yeah.
also have a website, Foraged Pigment Art.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that's my partner and I, Haley. We both paint, and we're in the upstate New York area. But yeah, with a book that will be coming out, and there'll be probably certainly a debut here with your podcast, and the ability to find it through following me. So,
Excellent.
and feel
Excellent.
free to reach out. I'm always excited to engage with curious people.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I thank you again, and namaste. And we shall
Namaste.
look forward to seeing you again in the future. Okay. Bye bye.
Cool, Michael. Thanks, man. See ya.